As America's young men and women continue to sacrifice themselves in military conflicts around the world, we have a tendency to forget those who have gone before. There are few World War II veterans remaining, and those of World War I have already joined the Pale Nations. But this sketch is on Corporal Walter James Amerson, a native of Clark County, Alabama, and a citizen of Escambia County for most of his life. He was born on April 3, 1893 in Walker Springs, Alabama, the son of Peter Franklin Amerson and Elizabeth Lizzie Davis Joyner. The year 1900 found the family in the community of McLeod in Clark County, where his father was a farmer. Reaching manhood, Walter would follow in his father's footsteps as a farmer as well. All was well in the Amerson family until the outbreak of World War I. Once again, America needed its young men for yet another war, as the draft board began to meet their quotas. At the time, Walter received his draft notice on May 28, 1918, while he was employed for B.B. Randolph at Woods Bluff as a sawmill operator. He was ordered to board a train in Jackson, Alabama, that would deliver the new inductees to Camp Sevier, South Carolina. His name was mentioned in the May 23, 1918 edition of the Clark County Democrat paper. Camp Sevier was near Greenville, South Carolina, and was considered a cantonment, where the 30th and the 81st Infantry Division was trained from May 18, 1918 to July 16. When basic training was complete, Walter was sent to the 306th Engineer Regiment and assigned to Company E for further training. As it turned out, the engineers were used for dangerous assignments such as clearing the way for infantry to advance. This meant cutting through thousands of feet of barbed wire while exposed to enemy snipers, mortars, and artillery barrages. Also, they installed pontoon bridges, repaired or constructed roads, cleared mines, and removed casualties, oftentimes within view of the enemy lines. When his unit was considered battle-ready, they were transported by train to the East River in New York and loaded onto a ferry. They sailed around Lower New York to a dock where they embarked upon the British steamer, SS Canada, for their voyage to England. On July 30, 1918, their ship joined a convoy of 13 troop transports escorted by a British cruiser and one American destroyer. When they reached the northern shore of Ireland, they were joined by British destroyers until they docked on August 11 in Liverpool. After disembarking, they marched to Camp Knotty Ash. After assembling the entire regiment there, all but Walter and Company E were placed on a train to Winchester, where they disembarked at Chesil Station before marching up St. Giles Hill along the old Roman road. Upon arrival, they were divided between the rest camps of Winnell Down and Morn Hill. The Morn Hill Transit Camp had over 2 million soldiers pass through there during the war. While at the transit camps, the boys were trying to get used to the British dialect, which was hard enough, but the food was so much different, especially having to eat so much goat meat. But they did enjoy walking around Winchester and seeing all of the historical sites. The city had become a major transit location for all the troops who were destined for the Western Front, and the 306th was to be no different. While the rest of the boys were enjoying Winchester, Walter and Company E was assisting in the unloading of all the baggage off the ship and loading it onto one of the trains for transport to Southampton in anticipation for their move to France. When it was time to move on, it was Company F who chose the short straw and was sent to Southampton 15 miles away, ahead of the regiment. There, they had to unload the baggage from the train and reload it onto the Channel steamer. The next day, the regiment marched to the docks and embarked for their voyage to Cherbourg, France. After disembarking, they spent 2 days in another rest camp before cramming into box cars for another train ride to Ervy. Waiting for them was an arduous march to their training area at Trinquoy, where each company was sent to either Cheney, Vezines, and Roffy for encampment. With their combat orientation complete, they marched the regiment to the front lines on September 20, 1918. There, each company was assigned to a particular task depending on the need at the moment. Company E was sent to Malfosse Valley, where they began constructing dugouts for the infantry, as well as crawling out through no man's land to repair the barbed wire entanglements that slowed down any enemy advance. They also erected and operated 5 sawmills to produce the lumber for the bomb shelters, trench walls, and such. While this was going on, Sergeant Charles Arthur Elliott of Dunlap, Tennessee, was wounded by a German patrol, while Captain Ambrose Harwell of Auburn, Alabama, was injured. Along the way, Corporal Walter James Amerson from Bratt, Florida, was gassed as well. On October 19, 1918, the regiment was withdrawn to Fontenay for rest. By November 9, a general advance against the Germans was ordered at 1 p.m. The infantry went over the top, followed by the 306th Regiment. Company E was tasked with extending the road toward Morinville. Afterwards, they finished the road from Moulainville forward and the road from Chatelain to assist in evacuating the wounded. On November 11, Company E was notified that they would make up part of the infantry reserves. Then later that day at 11 a.m., all artillery suddenly ceased on both sides and things got eerily quiet. The armistice had now taken effect, and the war was over. After the battle, the regiment began marching for 17 days, covering 165 miles, heading for Verdun. From Verdun they continued on to Chatillon, arriving on December 3, 1918. They would later move into the 12th training area, where the regimental headquarters was set up at Azy. They were now responsible for 500 square kilometers of roads and other civic features. By May 15, 1919, it was time to go home. For the next 2 days the full regiment boarded the trains for Le Mans. There, they boarded another train for Saint-Nazaire. On June 3 at 9 a.m., they embarked on the USS Santa Marta and set sail for New York. After 7 days at sea, their destination was suddenly changed to Charleston, South Carolina, landing on June 15. After another train bound for Camp Jackson, they were disbanded on June 18 and told to go home. Walter's parents had moved to Escambia County, Florida, either before he returned home from the war or just after, but regardless he wound up in Bratt, Florida, in 1920, where he would marry a local girl by the name of Ida Clementine Hanks in 1921. She was the daughter of Calvin Christopher and Louise Elizabeth Hanks, who also lived in Bratt. By 1930, Walter and Ida were in McDavid, where he was running a retail dry goods store. 10 years later, he was working as a foreman with the government's WPA program. In all, Walter and Ida would have 5 children between 1922 and 1936. Their son, Harvey Hubert Amerson, would serve with the U.S. Navy during the Korean War. Walter would pass away on April 6, 1951, and was buried in the Godwin Cemetery in Bratt in Escambia County, Florida. To those that answered America's call to arms, we salute you.